Hey, everybody. Before we get into the podcast, I want to talk about a really exciting, awesome new sponsor of the show, my good friends Joe and Kyle over at Psychedelics Today, which is an amazing podcast providing excellent information and education and on harm reduction and psychedelic medicines. They have great guests on every week talking about these very, very important topics. So I highly recommend going to check that out. And today we're going to talk with Kyle. He's joining me right now from Psychedelics Today about their new course, Navigating Psychedelics. And in my opinion, from what I've seen, it's really just a comprehensive overview of getting started in psychedelics, what, the kinds of questions that one might have, the kind of information. So it's a great resource, and I'm really, really super happy and excited to be promoting this. I think it's going to be really beneficial to a lot of people. So Kyle, thanks for joining me today to talk about this amazing work that you and Joe have put together, Psychedelics Today and Navigating Psychedelics.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Yeah, so Navigating Psychedelics, lessons on self-care and integration. It's pretty much a 101, 102 psychedelic course. Joe and I put it together from years of experience of working with these states, and also really integrate a lot of our training in holotropic breathwork and our time studying that. So the course really just is a nice arc. Starts off with preparation, what are psychedelics, go over harm reduction techniques, testing, safety, and then we get into what is the psychedelic experience. We kind of have this nice metaphor of a space expedition, right? So what's the preparation like? What is that experience when you kind of get out there in the psychedelic realm? So we go over a framework that we like to use for understanding these experiences. Comes from Stan Groff, who is a pioneer in LSD research and transpersonal psychology. He's been studying this stuff for a long time. And then on the descent back down, we talk about self-care. How do we take care of ourselves after an experience? And then the integration process. How are we moving these experiences or these insights forward into our daily lives so we can make some change? And so the course is jam-packed with material. We have 13 or 14 master classes that include interviews with experts that have been providing integration in the field of psychedelics. And it comes with a bunch of great resources. We have a trip journal, an integration workbook, which actually you can get a physical copy on Amazon, but we have PDF downloads in the course. We have some music playlists, a brief little breathwork introduction, and tons of tools and techniques and interviews. It's really a jam-packed course.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, it's just so great to see you guys putting this together. I know that it can benefit so many people, and through your experience, you're a student of these transpersonal psychology and the holotropic breathwork practices, and learning from Stan Groff. Taking yours and Joe's experience, as well as the information and education that you've learned and are now sharing from others, it's really awesome. And it's so beneficial because there's so many questions out there, and everybody's experiences are different, and there's a lot of harms, and there's a lot of dangers, and there's a lot of what should we look for and what should we avoid. And in my opinion, it seems like you and Joe are right on the leading edge of providing the best, updated, most well-vetted, and educational resources out there. So yeah, I highly recommend people going to check this out. I'm going to have a link in the show notes that you can click on, and it will take you directly there. If you want to go check out their website, it's Psychedelics Today. And like Kyle was just saying, great introduction to what psychedelics are, to their background, to the preparation and safety, and reducing harm, and having a nice, respectful journey in this process. So thank you, for Kyle, for coming on and explaining that. Anything else that people should know about the course, or where to go, or anything else that you would like to add?
Yeah, Joe and I like to say it's the course that we wish we had when we were younger, exploring non-ordinary states of consciousness. And so, it's just everything we've put together from our own personal experiences and also academic career. I did an undergrad in transpersonal psychology and really took a lot of time analyzing and studying these states of consciousness. And also, yeah, I think, one of the main goals that we like to emphasize about this course is to maximize the benefit and reduce the harm. So keeping people out of jail, out of hospitals, and hopefully really maximizing your potential if you are going to engage in this. So really taking a harm reduction approach here, and we really just want people to stay safe.
Excellent. Yeah, this is an invaluable resource, guys. And, when working with these medicines, or, when just enjoying them recreationally, there's a lot of things that can come up. And these guys, in my opinion, have put together something truly amazing here. And I'm happy to share that with the Mycadelic crowd. So please go check that out, Psychedelics Today. I'll put the link in the show notes. And and check out their podcast. And also, if there's extra support that's needed, I know that you guys offer that as well. So thanks again, Kyle, for sharing that. And look forward to continuing on this journey and hopefully giving people the best advantage that they can have when navigating this realm. So perfectly titled course, Navigating Psychedelics, Lessons in Self-Care. Go check that out, guys. Thank you so much again, Kyle and Joe, for putting this together. And thanks for coming on, Kyle, to talk about it.
Thank you.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a brand new episode of Mycadelic. Got a great show for you today. I have another wonderful psychedelic Michael on the show. Michael Phillip, host of Third Eye Drops, joins me for an awesome conversation. I really enjoyed this one, and I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface. So I'd love to have Michael back on the show and dive even deeper. Michael's got a great show at Third Eye Drops where he's really slinging verbal, really just be a conversational gunslinger. And the guy's got a way with words, man. Go give Third Eye Drops a listen, and you'll hear the way that he precisely picks powerful prose, pungently placed in your pineal gland. See, I gave it a shot, something to that extent. But really, you do get to hear, the intellectual depth and the curiosity. He's definitely someone that I really enjoyed having a chat with, because these are the kinds of conversations that I like to have. I call them mind jams. Michael calls them mind melds. Just this kind of conversation that I really enjoy having, which is, who knows where it's going to go. What's going to come up for me during the conversation? Am I going to discover something new? Which oftentimes, I forget who said this. Someone said, I write because I need to understand what I think. And I think that's great. I've never really been super attracted to writing, particularly. I've always liked conversation and speaking more. And oftentimes in conversations that I'll have, like on this show with this guest and solo casts that I do, I need to talk in order to understand what I believe and what I think. And when I get in conversations like the one you're about to hear, oftentimes I am, there's something that triggers in my mind that says like, oh yeah, so I'm always having these oh yeah moments and thinking about, oh, that reminds me of this, or I'd like to talk about that, or, so it's great when you can get into these mind melds, these cosmic conversational surfing quests. It's fun, it's enjoyable. One of the things that I like to do the most. So very happy about the guest today. Go check out his podcast, Third Eye Drops, thirdeyedrops.com, and go check out his writings, which he also publishes on Medium. And I've been aware of what Michael has been doing with Third Eye Drops for a little while. I never really kind of dove in, but then I saw this article that he posted on Twitter, and I've really been not using Twitter so much recently, called "You Are the Answer: Why it's more important than ever to become your own guru." And just reading it, I really liked it a lot. It kind of resonated. It also spoke to a place where I was in at the time, kind of thinking about these sorts of things. Sort of my hesitation to immerse myself in community, particularly certain kinds of communities, there's certain aspects of the psychedelic community or certain aspects of libertarian community, different kinds of communities that I feel like I could kind of go there, find others, and get attached to. There was always a little hesitance in my part not to get absorbed by the group think and the beliefs and values of the community, but to really kind of make sure that I maintain my own thoughts, my own beliefs, and the integrity and the respect of myself and my experience, and not necessarily accidentally or just by mere proximity getting sucked into the way of thinking of the group. But it's not to say that that one way is better than the other, like, okay, go be a part of a group or go be alone. There's a whole gray area in there of nuance to navigate. And that's why I titled this podcast "Wading in the Waters with the Woke Wizards of Woo," because sometimes that's what it can feel like. We have in the article, Michael mentions that, like, look, there was people at this event that I was at that really had existential wriggles, that they were really going through things psychologically and challenging times. They were having unpleasant experiences, and they were looking for some kind of real, genuine, earnest, authentic connection to a deep truth that they can then tie their ship to. They can plant their flag to and say, okay, this can help me. This makes sense of my life situation. This can help offer me a path forward, reasonably, logically, pragmatic, actionable. Okay, I can do these things. I can think about things in these kinds of ways. And sometimes, we can get, no matter what group, no matter what community, no matter what crowd, there's always the extremes. There's always, all kinds of different subsets of the groups. So, there's a lot of people out there, and, they could be saying things that make you feel good, but don't really hit you on a level that's going to make you willingly sort of participate and take action. Or maybe that if you are participating and taking action, you're sort of maybe doing some things that are just kind of temporary reliefs and not necessarily getting to the core or the heart of the issue. And so anyway, that's just a long way of just saying that I think Michael's that kind of guy. He gets to the heart, to the core of the issue. He wants to, dive deep and really investigate like an archaeologist dusting for bones of the ideas of the great philosophers and psychologists and the ones that are living that he has on his show, but being influenced by these great minds, these great thinkers, to then absorb that stuff, look at the world, and then apply it through our experience and our interpretation, and how we can make sense of that for ourselves. So I think Michael does a great job of that. Third Eye Drops is a really cool show. His articles on Medium are great too, so go check that out. All the links are in the show notes. Some of the articles are called "The Beauty of Not Knowing," "You Are the Answer" that I just made up, "You Are the Answer" that I just mentioned, and "Masks of Happiness: Why Real Satisfaction Requires Purpose and Transcendence." So really good stuff. What else? So I'm also going to put out a solo cast as a sort of like the part 3 of this 100th episode special thing. I haven't recorded it yet. And, sometimes when I record these solo casts, they could be shit. They could be terrible. I could be repeating myself, and this is also a good thing that Michael and I talk about in this show. The urge to create, knowing what to put out, what not to put out, how to sort of navigate that field, make decisions and discern, what's what's coming from an authentic place or a true place, what makes sense, what doesn't, and how to really carefully craft and construct that to put forward in the effort to have that resonate with people, to have that tickle people and say, oh, okay, yeah, that's coming through. That's a clear communication that's coming through. So sometimes I'm able to do that on solo cast. Sometimes I'm not able to do that. The times that I'm able to do that, I totally feel like I'm in a flow state. Like I don't even know what I'm saying. There's an energy that's coming through me and it's just going. And look, that's just what it feels like to me. I don't know, the science of it, or well, I know a little bit of the science of it. Stephen Kotler and Jamie Wheel talk about this in their book Stealing Fire and the Flow Genome Project, which I'd like to get those guys on the show someday. Jason Silva talks about this as well. Being in a state of flow where there is no time, there's no space, and you're just totally enraptured and enveloped in what you're doing. Soul focus, soul dedication to the activity at hand. And there's times during this podcast where I'm able to reach that state. I kind of feel like one's coming on right now, to be honest. But these are things sometimes that they happen when I sit down to record a solo cast, and sometimes they don't. And I try and do things to encourage them to happen. I remember Stephen Kotler talked about a good flow hack is to smoke a joint, drink a cup of coffee, and go for a run. And that definitely works too. Sometimes I'm not always able to do those things, but if I'm able to go for a walk in the park or sit down and do a meditation and breathing exercise, I can sort of try and get that flow state to come on. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But anyway, my point is, look out for that solo cast because I have a lot of things to say. I have a lot of stuff that I want to talk about and discuss. Some of it I touch on here with Michael in this interview, but I want to really dive deeper and kind of, try and do the best I can to lay my soul on the table and examine it like operation. If you want to support the show, go onto Apple Podcasts, leave a 5-star rating and review. If you can, take the time to do that. It helps bring the show up in the ratings. It helps get the conversations that we're having out there to a wider audience, to a larger audience, so we can find the others, more people can develop in this community, and that's one of my favorite things to see. So if you want to go a step further, you can go to patreon.com/Mike Brank. You could donate as little as $1 a month or $50 a month or $1 million a month. That would be fantastic, whatever you want to do. But you also get access to cool things like stickers, t-shirts, all kinds of interesting stuff coming. Also, the Micadelic WhatsApp Inner Sanctum chat group, which I'm just a huge fan of because it's people from all around the world that listen to the show. And if you want to get access to that chat group, people are talking about their stories, their journeys, their personal struggles, sharing trip reports, asking questions, organizing retreats possibly. There might be some Micadelic special retreats where we go to Amsterdam or Peru or different places. I want to start talking about doing things like that. So a lot of really cool, exciting stuff. There's going to be more live podcasts coming as well. But just, on the solo cast that I'm going to do, I'm going to kind of talk about the struggle of creating this show and doing a lot of the things that I'm doing and why I'm doing it and what kind of keeps me going, what puts me into a pit of despair. So I'm excited to talk about that. These solo podcasts are very therapeutic for me, and I know that you guys enjoy them. So stay tuned for that. What else? I don't know. Danny Barnett and Galaxia, thanks for the music. Decriminalize Denver. If you're in Denver, get out and vote. Vote on 301 on May 7th to decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms in the city and county of Denver, Colorado. Big issue, huge, important issue for cognitive freedom, cognitive liberty, and supporting people's rights and respecting the individual to choose what they want to consume for their mind, body, spirit, and how they choose to participate in the healing process of their human experience and their human journey. So very important to get out and vote for that. If you can't vote for that, just share the Decriminalize Denver stuff on social media. Donate to the campaign if you can. Go to decriminalizedenver.org and just get involved, because this is really cool. If this can happen here and they can decriminalize psilocybin mushrooms in Denver, then we could create a model for how the new modalities of existence can be. What the new sorts of environments and value systems and ways that human beings can organize themselves in society. This can be the new model of how we can do that, and we can bring that out, and it can spread like the mycelial network does, as above, so below. All right, guys, that's it. Long intro again. I'm sorry. I just can't be concise. I'm not as good as our guest, Michael Phillip, who is a concise, precision linguistic ninja when it comes to these things. But on Mycadelic here, I'm a verbose, vagabond, vivacious, verbal venturer, voluptuously entranced by victory. No, okay. I tried to give it another shot, but that reminds me, one more thing before we get into the episode. Some awesome guests coming up next, so keep an eye out. We have Hamilton Souther makes his return to the podcast. So I had an awesome conversation with Hamilton that's coming out soon. Niraj Nayak, founder of Soma Breath, known as the Renegade Pharmacist, is also going to be on the show next. And Jeffrey Martin of the Founders Project, and among many other things. So stay tuned for that. All right. Without further ado, Michael Phillip of Third Eye Drops. Peace.
Psychedelics are illegal not because a loving government is concerned that you may jump out of a third-story window. Psychedelics are illegal because they dissolve opinion structures and culturally laid down models of behavior and information processing. They open you up to the possibility that everything you know is wrong.
We don't need new laws that control our consciousness and rigidly place it in a prison.
Cognitive liberty. The fact that as adults, if we're not hurting anybody else, we should have the right to explore the contours of our own consciousness without any mediation or legislation on the part of somebody else.
Reject authority. Authority is a lie.
Or is it perception?
Information is power, but we have to seize the opportunity. The opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So yeah, we got a Michael squared psychedelic rap going on this morning. So
yeah, psychedelic something or others.
Yeah,
psychedelic Michaels.
Psychedelic Michaels. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, I think I've been kind of aware of what you were doing for a little while. I think we've had a lot of similar guests on the show here and there. Corey Allen, Eric Godsey, a couple other people, and I never really used Twitter, and like I was on Twitter one day and I saw you posted this article and I was like, huh, sounds interesting, and I read it and I was just like, I don't know, it was just like the synchronicity of it or something. Like I was like, yeah, like this is perfect for what's I feel like is going on right now, or at least what I'm seeing. So I think maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
For sure. Yeah.
I'd love to kind of like expand upon those thoughts that you wrote about. But first, I kind of want to talk just a little bit about like podcasting and like you and how you got started and all that stuff. If you want to dive into that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've always just been kind of a blabbermouthy type of person who likes to explore through the art of conversation, I guess you can say. And I remember distinctly I was actually teaching English in Japan in 2011 when people started hitting me with, you ever heard of this guy Joe Rogan? You ever heard of this guy Duncan Trussell? Kind of like the typical godfathers of this whole art form that's kind of skeeted all over the technoverse at this point. And just thinking like, holy shit, this is the types of conversations that I naturally have and naturally gravitate toward. And I just felt this immediate inclination to want to do it. And then I got home from Japan about a year later and started, doing the ritual that we all do of trying to overcome the inertia of not doing something to starting something new. Like, you know, talking yourself through all of the doubt, justifying why you should get behind a microphone and have something to say. And then that whole first year was kind of a tenuous journey. Like, I got started with all these other people, and it was just not, you know, it didn't really get to the heart of what I wanted to do for a while. And then eventually I kind of hit a stride, and then I rebooted the show as Third Eye Drops in 2016, I think, and just have been going every week.
Yeah, I think probably the most clever name out in the psychedelic podcast sphere. I haven't really, like, when I saw Third Eye Drops, I was like, yes, third, yes, exactly. That's awesome. Perfect. Yeah. So congratulations on coming up with that name. It's awesome. That initial inertia, like that resistance that comes, and that kind of like, who's going to want to listen to me, and like, what do I have to say, and what credibility do I have, and like all that kind of stuff. I still deal with that stuff on it, you know, all the time. It's like this constant kind of checking myself to be like, wait, did I sound too confident and like assured in that idea that I was presenting, or that thought that I was communicating? But I'd like to think that, you know, these podcasts that I do, and I think your podcast too, are these kind of like free form, kind of exploratory mind jam sessions of just, you know, surfing the infinite cosmic waves of wonder, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly what they are. And nobody, you know, on one hand, nobody really needs a credential to do that. It's like it's your birthright as a human being to explore why the fuck you're here, what you're doing. And the primary way to do that is by questioning and by having conversations, or at least that's what I gravitate towards. Some people are born with an innate bias toward, you know, doing experiments in the laboratory of their mind, or through math, or through logic. And those people are lucky in a way, because there's like really well-defined fields of study to undergo that sort of work through. But for people who gravitate toward conversation, like, everybody has that right. Anybody can hit record on a conversation and put it out there. That said, I do think that self-check that's built into all of our egos, that resistance, that doubt, is there for a very specific reason. And you should grapple with that on a daily basis. I mean, people who don't have that filter, it's a really fine line, man, because you want to be balanced. Obviously, there's a middle path there. The people who don't have a filter at all and are just constantly, I mean, I don't want to name any names, but sometimes you just, like, you know, I'll get tagged in things for whatever reason alongside many other podcasters and creatives that I respect. And, you know, it's really hard to say this without giving too much away and potentially incriminating someone. But there are just these people out there who don't have a filter, and they don't have this sense of like what's worth putting out and what's not worth putting out. And I don't know where that line is. I'm no authority on that, but you can just sort of feel it when people don't quite have it. But then on the other end of the spectrum, people who never put anything out, that's an equivalently, you know, problematic demon. That's a really tough one to grapple with too. I mean, I'm sure everybody has friends out there who are self-proclaimed artists or writers who just have mountains of work in their bedroom, and they've never released any of that shit. And that's really sad too. So there is this kind of middle path, of course, but I do think all of us have that right, man, especially when it comes to having conversations. It's like the most natural, most human thing you can do.
Yeah, like you said, there's no real kind of structured, ordered school or authority to kind of like guide this exploratory form of conversations, and, you know, really kind of being informed through our reading, our research, but also our direct subjective experiences, and then kind of fusing that with others to piece this puzzle together of something that we're working through or thinking of. So that's super important. What are some? You mentioned the holy godfather of Joe Rogan and Duncan Trussell. I mean, that seems to be a common story. That was mine. You know, I was doing stand-up comedy in New York, and I was walking dogs, and I would throw on podcasts all day, and I would just hear these conversations that I wanted to be a part of because I was thinking those things, and I was talking to people about that stuff. A lot of times I was talking to people about that stuff, and they were like, all right, wow, okay, this is heavy, man. I'm like, wow, where can I have like time to explore that? Who else is I guess who else has inspired you? And they don't have to be podcasters necessarily, but also, and who else is currently tickling your neurons and electrifying your modes of thought right now?
I've been revisiting philosophy proper lately, and then also doing a lot of my own writing, because I think there's a really primary challenge that you're confronted with when you start doing a lot of reading. And I'm going to try not to butcher this quote. I'm actually just going to get the sentiment across, because I'm definitely not going to get the quote right. But I was just talking to this philosopher who's just a real proper PhD philosopher who makes you feel so like you have an intellectual micro penis when you talk to him. And his name is Peter Shosted.
Yes,
Shosted.
yeah,
I can
I'm
never
familiar
say
with
his
him.
name
Yeah,
well, and man, he's so brilliant, and he comes at a lot of uh, classical philosophy from a more psychedelic, introspective angle. And he said this quote. It might have been like Bertrand Russell or something, but it's something to the effect that like the problem with reading too much is that you lose the ability to form opinions of your own, because you're constantly querying everybody else's ideas. So for me, it's a really fine line between exploring other people's ideas, but then really sitting down to do the work of like, okay, so what do I think? How does this flavor my existence? How does this further my understanding of questions that are, uh, causing existential wriggles in my own life? And so it's a balance, but unsurprisingly, I tend to gravitate toward philosophers that explore the nature of reality in such a way that tries to look behind the veil and tries to, ontologically define the undefinable, as paradoxical as that sounds. But I think I was going to say what we're all kind of looking for and trying to put our finger on, but again, I think it depends on your personal predilection. But for me, that's always been something that's been a burning question. I mean, I vividly remember being young and not believing in mainstream religion, thinking that I can't believe these people swallow these answers,
right.
from priests, politicians, whatever. Like none of it ever made enough sense to me. And I did the typical I'm a jaded teenager thing, and nothing. You're like, these fucking people, everybody believes this, blah 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 blah. And then I actually remember sitting in my philosophy 101 class and just thinking like, it's time to shift your focus, man. You could sit here in this jaded masturbatory cesspool of yeah, I can't believe people believe this crap. Or you could get out there and search just the infinite, never-ending library of ideas and brilliance and wonder that's out there. So that was sort of a really big shift for me. But I'm not going to hit you with too many super esoteric names. It's really all the philosophers you hear about. Like, I think if I could attach any ist to myself, which is not anything I really aspire to do, but for me, it's like lineage that starts with Plato. It's the Platonic, ideas, because I'm sure you've heard there's a famous quote by the philosopher Whitehead that is something to the extent of
Alfred North
all
Whitehead,
of yeah, it's like all of Western philosophy is basically a series of footnotes to Plato. And for me, that's so true, because he presented such a clear, cohesive, um, metaphysical underpinning that I can never get away from it personally. And that's where I keep coming back to. And I think that probably answers your question, although it implies many more, and I could continue rambling, but I'll kick it back to you.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I hope you do continue to ramble. That's what we do here. But yeah, I agree. It's amazing. It's like, when you're thinking about these sort of amazing, profound, revolutionary, transformative ideas that have informed civilizations and humanity over the ages, and then you look back and there's like one guy standing back there just kind of like, hey, don't worry, like I got a lot of it figured out and you guys just run with it and we'll just
kicked the dominoes, you deal with it.
Yeah. Was Plato the student of Socrates? Okay, so
he was Socrates' most famous student, and as you and probably most people know, Socrates never wrote anything down. So
right.
We had, he
was a podcaster.
Yeah, right. He was. Yeah,
no microphone.
He was the OG proto podcaster, and so we're reliant upon his students for relaying his ideas, and there's sort of the same kind of air about him as almost like a Jesus, where you have all of these different students of his that were following him and just insistent upon his brilliance and how he was the most brilliant man living in Athens at the time. And these are other brilliant people. And Plato emerged obviously as the most famous student of his and the most, I don't know if he was the most prolific writer on Socrates, but he's certainly the most famous and did the most to further Socrates' reputation and solidify him, as kind of this like immortal stone man of philosophy. So he was absolutely a student of Plato and or a student of Socrates rather. And there's so many. I mean, it's hard to know. The problem we run into is it's really hard to know whose ideas were whom's, because is it the editorialization of Plato's ideas through, or Socrates' ideas through Plato that made Socrates seem so brilliant? Or was it just a really perfect, objective relaying of exactly what Socrates thought? I kind of think, I personally think that Plato put a lot of his own flavor in there, but, who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I would think so. If so many people considered him to be brilliant, I feel like you can kind of get a sense when maybe someone's just like regurgitating somebody else or copying someone else. So, yeah, for him to put his own mark on there, I think is really the mark of a great thinker. Someone that can really kind of synthesize the ideas and let them percolate and formulate in their own mind, and then really bring something kind of new to the table.
Right.
Which is extremely difficult. I'd like to think that I offer something, but I don't think I offer anything new necessarily when I communicate, which is really hard, which is really difficult. But then again, it almost is like, how do we know, when somebody kind of reveres somebody for their genius, when a group of people kind of foist somebody up and says like, hey, this is the person, these ideas are clear, they're lucid, they're profound, they're calibrated more towards the realm of where we feel the truth is. Where does that, like, I wonder sometimes, like, where that comes from, like where that knowing comes from inside of us, how can we recognize that?
Well, yeah, the Greeks thought that it came from external sources. I'm sure you're familiar with the original idea of genius was actually a being that visited you and it, like, inspired you with an idea, and the genius would come and express itself through you and through your art. And of course, I don't know if it's this esoteric or this exoteric thing, but I do think that it's extremely fleeting, and you can feel it when it shows up in sort of an inspired flow state, and you're just in this sort of ecstasy of doing, and you're not thinking about what you're doing. Like if you're writing, the next words just popping out. If you're playing music, the next notes just riffing out of the guitar.
Amazing moments.
Doing a ramble on a podcast, you're just going and you're not thinking about what you're saying. It's just coming off the top of the dome. And I think that that is the essence of it. It's when you're fully tapped into it, there's no question. It's this palpable thing that's right there in the moment. And that's the essence of novelty. That's what Terence McKenna was always rambling about and chasing after, and why he was so good at capturing it, because he was able to somehow turn off the frontal lobe and just go and just, use it. It's interesting because even though it's entirely in the moment and it's being generated in the now, it's still going through the prism and the genius of the individual. And Terrence McKenna had so much of that naturally. So he, it was like this just fire of novelty that would come out of his mouth, but also through the prism of his insane experience and just countless psychedelic trips and so much reading and so much conversation that I think that's what immortalized him. But to get back to the original question of where that comes from, of course I don't know. But
damn it, I thought you were going to be able to give me an answer. We figured it out.
There does seem to be there does seem to be this sort of nowness that is palpable when it's there. Like nobody seems to doubt it when it's there.
Yeah.
But it's it's kind of like, it reminds me of this it's, if you try to take apart anything, even a physical object, and really break it down to its components, it's not going to make any fucking sense, man. Like I was just like watching something before this, talking about this conversation that happened between the two famous philosophers, Locke and Berkeley. And Locke was a famous critic of a lot of these rational ideas that we've been talking about. A lot of times Plato is considered the one of the godfathers of rationalism, because to him the rational mind was more real than the physical world. Like the realm of mind was a higher level of reality than the sort of the physical world was almost a perversion to him. It was like an emanation of something transcendent and greater, but not the true world. And I'm sure everybody's familiar with the allegory of the cave and, the sort of illusory, like he was really the first person to, maybe not the first person, but he was the first person to make famous the sort of idea that you live in a sort of matrix. You live in a sort of illusory world that is a very poor reflection of what real reality is. And what real reality was to him was the mind. But so getting back to how I started this conversation between Locke and Berkeley is, if you look at this cup that I'm holding up right now, for everybody who's just listening, it's this white mug, right? And you start asking questions about its qualities. Oh, we can measure this, we can break it down to this component and that component. Where in this mug is the white?
Yeah.
Is it in a molecule? No, it's not in a molecule. So when you start to ask these questions about the nature of even physical objects, it starts to become this like this abstract concept very quickly. And I don't even remember why I'm talking about this now, but
we've entered the realm of abstraction.
I
going.
think it made sense. What was your original question?
Well, yeah, so it's like, so exactly what you're saying. So it's like when trying to kind of like calibrate reality for like normal understanding, when there is somebody who can kind of tap into that frequency and explain it. And I think you did a good job of talking about that when talking about Terence and like, the genius and the flow that comes through. I think that really is what it is. Some people are just better at capturing that lightning in a bottle than others, but it's also the recognizing of that from the audience, or from people that are listening right now. We're talking about something. Are they understanding? Is this too abstract? Are they able to say, that's the thing, like that's it? So that's kind of a participatory endeavor, right? That happens between the person who's communicating these things and the person that's trying to understand them. So I guess, it can get a little caught in the weeds when talking about this stuff, for sure, right? I mean, you can break down that mug infinitely, right?
Right. Yeah, you can. You can. And I think the bottom line in this whole conversation too is that you can get too, like, sometimes I'll speak with people, like Peter Showstead or something. He knows so much about so much technical philosophy and so many people that he could, he's just spitting hot fire, and I'm sitting there getting my brain melted. But you're right. To some people, they're like, I don't even know who this guy is, and we're like 10 minutes into talking about his like super technical theories. And yeah, that's not going to be for everybody, but it will be infinitely rewarding to the right people. And that's sort of like that's just as important. Maybe it's not going to give you as big of like sponsorship deals or something, but
yeah.
but there's definitely a place for it. And I think like for people to make room for that is very, very important, because take a look around, man. Take a look at what the normal discourse is and
Right.
what generates the most clicks. We got to get the good shit in. We got to get the meaty, hard to understand, dense ideas in wherever we can. Even if it's only going to make an oblique dent in your mind and you'll barely take anything away from it, being exposed to that kind of stuff is unbelievably important.
Right. Yeah. If it can be presented in a way that's palatable and engaging and that hooks somebody so that it's relatable and they can understand it, because oftentimes a lot of this stuff will just go right over their heads, but then they'll attach to, and I think this is what you brought up in the article too, which was really good on Medium. They'll attach to these other kinds of ideas. They'll have a psychedelic experience and be like, oh my God, I had a mushroom. I took a heroic dose. I am from Zeta Reticula. I'm from the Pleiades. I have a message. I'm a star child. I'm an indigo person. And this is my mission. And this is my, like, where did that transmission come from? Is that like, or even like the phenomena of cults? And I would argue that, we live in a massive cult, right now in this kind of mainstream corporatocracy and government culture and all this kind of stuff. It is a cult in a certain sense, and then you have these like little smaller cults where you could have a leader guy up there saying, and this is the truth and this is the way, and people will fucking buy into that. But where's that, like, what's going on there? Like, where's that disconnection? Is how come we're able to look at that from the outside and criticize it? And should we criticize it? And I think the answer is probably yes, right? Like, we should kind of, as you said in the article, what Terrence said so eloquently is, deciphering shit from Shinola, right? Like distinguishing the differences between that. So what's up with that, man?
Yeah, I guess allow me to recap the article.
Yeah, please,
for people who haven't read it. So it's called "You Are the Answer," and the whole underlying idea is that there is this conditioning that we've all undergone, where we're just so trained to look to the outside for answers, to look to outside authorities, to look to teachers, to look to gurus, to look to experts, to tell us how to do something and tell us what the right way is. And every questioning person, as they grow up, is going to start rejecting traditional sources of knowledge to a certain extent. They're going to realize that these adults are fallible. They're going to realize that, hey, these are just people out there struggling to figure it out just like me. So they're going to start looking to new sources. And I think that is a beautiful thing, and we all should do that. But at the same time, that's where a lot of problems can happen, because if you're not equipped with the right tools to separate the shit from Shinola, as Terrence McKenna puts it, you're going to end up you can end up in some really weird places. On the extreme end of things, you could how many people out there think it's a great idea to blow themselves up right now? There's a unfortunate number of people who think that it's a good idea to blow themselves up because they started to hear what they perceived to be the quote unquote truth. And now they're out, just think about the insane indoctrination involved in that. I mean, in a less extreme angle, you're going to have people out there who start going to new age conferences thinking that, like you said, that they're like actually a Pleiadian conscious, like from the Pleiadian, whatever the Pleiades are, group of stars,
yeah.
And they think that they're put here to like raise the vibration of consciousness on the planet Earth. I've met these people. It's unbelievable to just try to have a conversation with them. It's like, never have I heard people say so many words and never say anything. It's all jargon. It's all new age gobbledygook that means nothing.
Right.
And, these are the places that you can wind up when you're not equipped with the skills and the critical tools and the sort of intellectual blade to cut through the bullshit. And that's where the danger crops up. And I think the way to avoid that is to flip the paradigm. You got to stop looking outside for answers. You got to stop looking to gurus. You got to stop looking to experts. You got to stop looking to even other, people that you admire for the ultimate answer. Of course, I'm not saying that we don't need teachers, we don't need community, we don't need guides. But as Socrates said in the article, I highlight this quote, is that Socrates is really the ultimate teacher, right? Like everybody basically agrees, like we were talking before, he's basically this God level immortal philosopher. His ideas have rippled throughout history ceaselessly for thousands of years. Every single person knows who he is. Every single person like even the most, walk to a random person on the street, they'll say, oh yeah, he's this old sage wise man from ancient Greece, right? Everybody knows that. That's how good his ideas were. That's how much of an impact he's had on
Yeah, he was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
Right, yeah.
Socrates.
So what he said is that he is but a midwife for knowledge. He can help facilitate the birth of knowledge in the mind of other men or women or whatever, of course. But it does not come from him. It comes from each person individually. And we need to get back to that paradigm. We need to figure out how to give birth to information in ourselves and in other people. And that's a very key distinction. You could get into this conversation where it starts to sound semantic, like, well, wherever the information comes from, we need to get it. But I disagree. I think when you invert the conversation, when you switch to the esoteric viewpoint of that there's something primordial within me that is the ultimate authority, and that's what I should be seeking after, I think that's when you can start to have some real key epiphanies. Because if I badger my friend and be like, dude, you're in this shitty job, you're in this bad relationship, you have these asshole friends or parents or whatever, you got to make changes, you got to stop doing these drugs, whatever their problem is, that can easily bounce right off of them if the right levers and switches don't flip inside of themselves. And that's what we need to be after, because you can say you want to change, you can have other people telling you need to change, you can have, whatever, but until it's palpable, again, when it goes off in somebody's mind, you see it. It's like you don't have to tell them to not eat the food that's making them morbidly obese anymore. You don't have to tell them to stop taking the drug that's killing them. It's a choice that goes off in their own being somehow. And that's what we all need to be going after, and it has the power to take these really simple things like writing down a goal or something. And I say this in the article as well. If someone tells you got to write down your goals, okay, and you begrudgingly do it, that's not very powerful. But if you believe that you're making a covenant with yourself, you're sending a transmission, a prayer, whatever you want to call it, to the deepest fiber of your being that, could actually connected to all of the transcendent oneness in the universe, or it's just an idea, or it's just a part of your psyche, whatever. When you do that, it's infinitely more powerful. It's like it becomes this sacred prayer to, a future version of yourself. And when you do that versus, oh, this guy told me I should do this, it's night and day. It's totally. So much more than a semantic thing.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, and I think we did kind of figure out that previous question. It's about lighting that fuse within inside somebody. That spark of curiosity for them to then willingly and voluntarily go on that path of discovering for themselves, and really maybe for the first time thinking for themselves, and then we get into this whole thing of like what you're talking about right there. And I believe that's true, because you're sort of constructing this, if we want to call it like an energetic frequency through intent, through language, through writing something on a page that is creating this reverberation in your field of consciousness or whatever, that then informs you to move forward, because it's coming from within and it's being delivered to the higher self, I guess, to the higher intent, to the higher purpose on a willingful level, So I think that's really the key there, is to give, try and offer something up that sparks a curiosity within somebody, so that they willingly want to explore and make the changes, because any other way is just, is just shit. It's just tyranny and force and coercion and manipulate. It's dark arts. It's manipulating language and trying to convince people of things and persuading them, and that's dangerous, right? Like that has.
Yeah, and it's also, I mean, even if it's not, as insidious as that, it's like, it's just another person's idea, and another person's idea is never as impactful as your own idea, right? I mean, like, when it's, man, if anybody's been involved in any kind of artistic project, like I played in bands for years, and when you would hammer out an idea and work on it, and then feel the anxiety of, oh, this part needs work, and then feeling like it's good enough to show everybody else in the band, like that idea is like so sacred to you now, and this is sort of like an egoic, sort of problematic example, but it's kind of like that. It's sort of like this thing that you've nurtured, you've given birth to, you've shaped, is like, that is just so much more valuable to you. And when you start to do that to your own mind and your own psyche and your own goals, it's becomes this, it's difficult to even wrap it in nomenclature, because it becomes like this sacred ritualistic bond that you create with yourself. Like when I and it's, again, it's not the exercises themselves are not these weird things that are hard to understand. It's the intent, it's why you're doing it. And if you sit down with the notion of like, whatever's about to go down in this paper is sacred, and I'm going to be real careful about what I write, because I'm fucking like etching it into my soul right now. If you think of it that way, dude, that's some powerful shit. And it will rattle around in your brain all day long. It's like, remember when you made that covenant with yourself about doing X, Y, and Z? You're not doing those things right now. And when you have that in your mind, the knowledge that you're not doing these things, it kind of drives you a little bit crazy. And it helps me stay responsible and on my shit so much more.
Yeah, I think it kind of ushers you into a whole new frame of being, where now you're kind of, when you're moving into that space, when you've created something, when you've made that covenant, when you're walking towards that path, it's sort of like a challenge and a test, that if you can live up to that, then new levels of the game will appear to you, and then you'll really start moving on to discovering these kind of genuine thoughts and ideas and feelings and emotions and habits that start forming and are birthed out of this new and novel way that you created, and that is way better, I think, than I think that everybody has to kind of follow somebody else at least first, as some form of imitation, at least until you kind of grapple and you get a sense of where you really fit. I think like when I started, I don't do comedy anymore, but when I started doing stand up, like I was definitely like imitating the guys that I liked a lot, and then eventually I kind of found my own groove, my own flavor, and then that's when really the newness and that stuff starts birthing and opening up a whole new level of adventure to be discovered on that realm.
Yeah, it's the path. I think that's a natural progression in the path. It's the same with me. Again, for me with music, it's the same with podcasting, because it's, you see something about yourself in those people. You see something that you realize is kind of latent within you that could be awakened, and it feels good. You see them expressing that through themselves, and you know that in you there's something similar, and it's reminding you of it, and it's making you want to wake it up. And I think it makes sense that you would start, by imitating. I think everybody does that. Artists do, like everybody does that, right?
Yeah, playing cover songs, things like that. Yeah.
Right.
Although comedians
But-
never do cover jokes, which is
Yeah, you can't
interesting.
Do that. You're not supposed to, at least.
Yeah, you're not.
That's the naughty. But that's what I think. I think that's what it is. It's seeing, an aspect, like a latent aspect of yourself that you're almost being reminded. That's what's drawing you toward it. It's like you're being reminded of this thing that you have the capacity for somewhere within you. If again you do the necessary toil and work to do it.
Yes, yeah, that's the key right there. Yeah,
absolutely. So I think there is, of course, there is this interplay between this esoteric and exoteric that we're talking about, but the only thing that makes sense to me is the internalization and that that sort of birth process that Socrates was talking about that I mentioned before. Anything that's real, that's palpable, that's evolutionary, that metamorphosizes you is an internal endeavor. It's a transmutation.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, when you were talking, I was reminded of this great quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, where he says, "A man should learn to detect and watch that gleam of light which flashes across his mind from within, more than the luster of the firmament of bards and sages. Yet he dismisses without notice his thought because it is his. In every work of genius, we recognize our own rejected thoughts. They come back to us with certain alienated majesty." It's like,
that's great.
Yeah, it's like, fuck, yeah. And that's good. Like, for me, when I first heard that, I was like, that means like just go, like when I recognize this thing, because how many times you've probably seen this before, right? I assume that you probably have. You think something and maybe you're like, oh, I don't know about that. And then you see somebody else like publish it or do it and you're like, fuck, I thought that, So it's catching on to that gleam of light.
It is. It absolutely is. I think the more you can put your head down and do the work and put it out there, the better. I don't think a swing and a miss is the worst thing in the world. How many artists are out there doing everyday work now? There's so many artists on Instagram that are putting out art every single day. And sometimes they'll put something out that doesn't particularly enrapture me, but so what? They're going to do it again tomorrow. And I think the more that you can detach from the possible repercussions or forecasted future of the result of what you're doing, the better. Just put it out there and don't, and I'm kind of contradicting myself before because I mentioned like there are some people with no filter. Like you do still, and that's not good either. And you do still need to have a certain amount of self-criticism, of course, but
yeah, self-awareness, right?
Yeah, if anything, man, like I'm as guilty of it as anyone else. I made a video that I published 5 months ago, and it took me probably 3 months to get the video fully edited and out. And I was like, I'll get this done in a week or two, and it, kept kicking the can down the road. And I eventually did publish it. And I didn't even for some reason, I didn't even like post it on my website for like 5 months. It's just like, it's just these weird little like mind traps or procrastinatory like modes of consciousness we get stuck in. And the more we can avoid those, I think the better it is. Just stop trying to like we were talking about before at the beginning of the conversation, stop trying to rationalize why you have the authority to do something or why it's worthwhile to do something, and just do it. Do it. 9 times out of 10.
Right. I agree. I think that is the best way. And I put so much stuff out there that I look back on and I go, I'm like ashamed of or disgusted by now. But I think it's also a good kind of signal of the growth and the evolution, and I think that's a good thing to see, because I don't fucking know. Like, I don't know. I like to think that like I'm moving closer to ideas and information that's going to better help me in my life when I encounter situations and circumstances that require me to act in a certain way. That help propel me forward into living in more truth and more honesty, and I think we all get trapped in these things. Just the other day, I was talking with my girlfriend about how I was like, shit, like I didn't even realize Like my ego, when my ego takes over, like I didn't even realize that I was projecting like onto you about this thing that we were going through. And it's like, because I got so involved in this one mode of thought, and that could be very like alluring and seductive, when you find a mode of thought and you're like, oh yeah, like this is the rational, this is the real. And I wasn't even applying it to myself. I was like projecting it out onto other people. And that was scary because but thank God I had the awareness to say, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing, right? So, yeah, I mean, I think that's, when we're talking about all this stuff, I mean, what is it? Because to me, this is kind of what it means to me, is to act in a way where I'm performing at a level that is true to my highest self, to my highest good, so that I can make a contribution that's worthy and valuable, that helps other people, that helps myself, that helps make my environment and my surroundings a better, more easy place to navigate, right? And more understanding as well.
And I think it's even more basic than that, man, because there's such a crisis
good.
of being right now, man. Oh my God. If you want to horrify yourself, look up the suicide rates right now.
I know.
Suicide, I believe, is now the second leading cause of death among young people like 18 to 34 or something. Second,
it's crazy.
And it's not much better the next age bracket up. I think it's like third or fourth. So when you ask yourself where that kind of the existential hopeless turmoil is emanating from, either there is a unseen epidemic of mental illness and neurotransmitter imbalances, or like there's some sort of genetic demon that's cropping up. But I don't think so, man. I think this is a crisis of being and a crisis of existential, or a crisis of an existential nature. And I think it's because people just can't see the meaning in what they're doing. I think it's because people don't feel like anything they're doing matters anymore, in a just endless vacuum of vapid information, nonsense, and obligations. And when you start to do something for directed higher purpose, like even an art form like podcasting or art itself or whatever, just something that in and of itself makes you feel valuable, even better makes it feel kind of sacred, then that's powerful, man. That can pull you out of some really dark, deep holes. And I think that's what anybody in one of those dark, deep holes needs to figure out for themselves, unfortunately, is how they can do that, like where that light is and how to go toward that light. So I just think it's like unbelievably basic. And the problem is we're just like losing all of the traditional modalities for doing that aren't very attractive anymore. People used to find that through religion. People used to through, having a nuclear family or whatever. And a lot of people still do. But for a lot of those people still, there's just like, man, I can't believe he was depressed. He had a good job and a good family. And like, suddenly he just, offed himself, and people are wondering what it is. And it's like, there's a very basic need that's not being met, unfortunately. And I think that we can all do it through what you were talking about. I really think we can. It's just, but it just takes the proper psychic transmutation, to use a really flowery, shitty way to explain it.
Yeah, we need like an astral sledgehammer to just crack through people's like minds or something. I saw this you're talking like, just vapid wasteland of social media, just all the crap that's out there. And it's just like, it's not anything new. I mean, I read this amazing book a while ago, Neil Postman's book. Jesus, I'm blanking on the name. Amusing Ourselves to Death. Highly recommend. Amazing book. And where he looks at like Huxley's Brave New World and Orwell's 84. It was released, I think, in 85. So he's like, 1984 has come and gone, and we haven't really seen like a total Orwellian transformation, but we are kind of seeing more of a Huxleyan transformation in this Brave New World sense, where look, the future, there will be no need to ban books because no one will want to read them. We're just going to be like those blobs in Wall-E that are like scooting around on that spaceship, slurping up big gulps and just entertained by a constant screen. But anyway, I saw this great quote, and it was, or this great meme that someone posted, and it was like a picture of a koala bear, and he was like hugging onto this deforest landscape, this like cut down tree that was like cut in half, and he was like shaking and all weird, and these people are like, oh look, see, this koala bear has mental illness, and it's like, well, his fucking environment is shit, right. What do you expect? Mm-hmm. I mean, I get a sense that you probably have the same sentiment, and reading your article, and just I go on Instagram every day, and I'm trying to kind of spread the show and connect with people and make good art, make things that are cool. But I see so much platitudes and just like you said before, I don't know, 1-1-1-1, like everything's going to be a type yes and everything's going to be okay. It's like, but people feel good when they see that, though.
Yeah, and in a way that's better than the alternative, because there is also so much just bold negativity out there.
Sure,
negativity
of course.
For the sake of negativity, or it's this sort of, ego porn where it's encouraging people to compare themselves to you and, hey, look at how much better than you I am. That's kind of like the insidious subtext of a lot of the celebrity culture right now, and that doesn't inspire very much meaning or good feelings in the minds of people who are looking at them, realizing like, I'm never going to look like that. I'm never going to have that. So that's a problem too. And I do think the empty platitudes are a big problem, because they've become these like empty husks of what they're trying to be. They've become these cliche versions that just don't hit people with any kind of impact or immediacy anymore. So that's a whole separate problem too. But I do think our environment, largely like the koala, even though maybe it's not trying to kill us, it's slowly sort of doing this vampiric thing to us, where it's sucking our will, by making us play these comparison games, making us, just that much more uninspired, like just robbing our brain of all of its dopamine.
Right.
And that's not very inspiring either. And I keep harping on this, and maybe it's just because it's where my mind has been lately, but I really think the antidote for that is to turn the lens inside and force yourself to do something. Force yourself to do something creative or progressive, or learn, just that feeling of stretching your neurons and doing something that's hard. That's, you're not going to sit there and like worry about how, lacking your ass is compared to like Khloe Kardashian's or something. If you're
I was thinking that, yeah.
Yeah. If you're trying to like learn a song on the piano or something. So I think it's just, there's so much, for me, there's so much joy in that, in that process of struggle and cutting through the thicket of the unknown. It can be an awesome experience, and but it's just harder. It's harder to go that way, because it's not easy. It's much easier to just keep scrolling, and I do plenty of that. Believe me, I do plenty of that. But at a certain point, it's just you gotta find it. You gotta find the motivation to get off of that like well lubricated lane.
Oh yeah, it's just this like psychic spider web that's just trapping everybody in. And I mean, and we're participating in it. We're participating in it as well. But it's like, that whole, like, I was just talking about this the other day about the message. Like I got a little frustrated. I was just like, man, it's like so weird. Like I'll write something, or I'll put something out, or I'll have like a really vulnerable podcast that I share or whatever. And it's like, fuck, like I was hoping for some more clicks, or I was hoping for some more likes on this.
Yep.
And then I see, some video of like some guy getting like kicked in the nuts by like a kangaroo, and it's like, millions and millions of likes or whatever it is. And the conversation that I was actually specifically talking about was like my girlfriend was like, oh, I'm going to go to this like church with like a friend, just like, I don't know, she wants to like go there. Like she's not religious or anything. They were just like checking it out. And my friend the other day like tagged this photo. He was in LA and he went to that like mega, like Justin Bieber's pastor's mega church guy thing, who's like the guy who's like, yo, Jesus is lit. Like God is like your homie, like they kind of like package it in like a relatable. He's wearing like ripped jeans and like a cool trendy t-shirt, but like talking about the Bible and stuff. And it's like, hey, maybe that's cool. Maybe that's good. I don't know. But there's something to, I think, the message that maybe, that we're trying to communicate, the sort of what you're saying about like, going into yourself, finding it and discovering it for yourself. That's just not like as like sexy to people. I feel like it doesn't have this like, but it is when you do it. It's like, how do you communicate direct experience and like the awe of entering into the realm of knowing and wonder and like curiosity and joy that comes from walking your individual unique path. It's like, it's kind of hard to like package that up in like a sexy, clickable way.
Right. It really is. And I don't know if that kind of thing is good or bad. I guess I just defer to, it's good for people it's good for, and it's useless for people that it's not good for. Yeah. That's useless for me, because to me, it's changing the outfit of the same shit that didn't work for me in the first place. Like putting a better looking outfit on the same thing is not going to do it for me. Giving it a facelift is not going to do it for me, And I think what it boils down to is, throughout the history of all of spirituality, especially in the West, there's been this clear delineation between the exoteric and the esoteric. The exoteric path is you go, you do actions, physical actions, where you're in a group, you're listening, you're saying prayers, you're doing prostrations, whatever you're doing. And then there's what we've been largely orbiting around for this whole conversation, which is the esoteric path. It's the inward facing path of exploring your psyche, exploring yourself, figuring out where the root of all of that is, figuring out what the ground level of your being is, and then having that realization that that ground level of your being is the same as everybody else's, and that's likely what everybody's been talking about when they've been talking about God, or they've been talking about the transcendent, or whatever nomenclature you want to use. And I think starting that process is so difficult because we don't have the tools, we don't have the traditions. The East, their systems aren't perfect either, but at least they are predicated upon contemplative practice. They're predicated upon sitting down and going in and letting layers, kind of spill away, and taking the veils off of yourself and of existence, and doing that very methodically, regularly. We don't have that here. I mean, we're not born valuing that. We can't weigh it. We can't make money out of it. So it's just this thing that, to most people, they don't see the point in doing it. But when you fast forward that experience by having a mystical experience, it makes it very clear and present, and the power of it is unparalleled. Of course, it is possible to have one of those experiences without years and years and years of practice. And the title of your podcast is kind of alluding to one of the primary ways to do it. So I think that's really, how you make it attractive, is by making it personal, and by making it a reality for the person who's looking for it. You're saying, yeah, maybe that's a good path, but maybe this is a good path too. Maybe give this a try. And if they are able to, and that's the thing, man, is you can't just give somebody a bag full of mushrooms and be like, I'm going to change your life. You don't know. They're like, yeah, dude, I laughed a lot. It was hilarious. That might be as far as they get. That might be as far as they get, and that's fine.
I
too.
often have conversations like that, with people, I guess, who are kind of outside of the sphere of what we're doing, and they'll be like, "Oh yeah, psychedelic, yeah, yeah, what do you talk about, like psychedelics? I did mushroom once, man. Like I went to Six Flags and I was on mushrooms. It was dope, like, but I don't do that shit anymore. I got a wife and kids, and
Right.
I'm just
exactly.
like,
Right.
yeah, I mean, I don't know what to say. Like, like, should I launch into a whole kind of thing about like, well, it's not really about that, or is it just like, hey, if that's your experience, cool. I don't know, whatever you want to do. And that gets back to kind of like this shit from Shinola thing, like where what Terrence was getting at, right? And it's kind of like, how do we tell someone, or how do we feel that we have the authority to determine what's good or bad, right? I mean, is that, but there is something though, right? There is something there about kind of deciphering, I guess, what maybe is serving and what's not serving. But then again, it gets back to this point where like, well, how do you know if this isn't serving? Maybe the guy that thinks he's from the Pleiades or whatever, that's his own way of understanding and making meaning out of something, so it's informing him of his thing. I guess it gets to the point where it's bad is when you have people who are condescending and pretentious and, right, like kind of imposing,
delusional.
That's where it gets bad, right?
Yeah, and I think it's I really hate to use this because it's so cliche, but it is that sort of red pill blue pill thing that I don't really think is real. Like I think that's a false dichotomy a lot of the time. But I think I use this example in the article as well, that those people often, ironically, who are most likely to use that binary terminology of the red pill, blue pill thing.
Right.
Blue pill is illusion, red pill is truth. Most people who use that sort of phrasing and claim to be champions of the red pill and questioning are really keeping themselves trapped in the same, matrix of ideology most of the time. Like they've moved from what they perceive to be a mainstream narrative to, now I believe in conspiracy theories and this is what's really real, when really now you're just trapping yourself in a new weird little binary mind game of I'm for truth and these shape-shifting lizard people are the source of all the evil in my life. Therefore, I have just liberated myself of any personal responsibility because now I know where all the evil's coming from, and it's coming from the elites and the deep state and the shape-shifting lizards and the Pleiadian whatever the fucks. And that is not taking the red pill. That's like going into a new conveniently laid out narrative. And I think that's the problem that a lot of people, that's the quagmire a lot of people are getting into when they get too deep into these spiritual paths or too deep into their identity politics or their actual politics or their whatever identifications, is like you're getting trapped in another game. You're not getting any closer to self-realization or to real truth. You're getting trapped in another game that's sort of, there is a real such a thing as social justice. There is a real problem with conspiracies. There are real conspiracies being perpetrated out there by bankers, by crooked politicians, by mobsters, by maybe, I don't know, maybe the Illuminati is real. I don't know. Like, so yeah, there are some conspiracy theories, but what's that going to do for you? Is that going to bring you existential satisfaction? Is that going to motivate you? Is that going to help you do what we've been talking about all throughout this podcast? I don't think it's going to help you do that. I think it's going to distract you further from doing that.
Yeah. You've just entered into a new, comfortable cognitive space of planting your flag down in an area and saying, okay, we'll settle here, because this is like, it requires a lot of, I think, effort and energy to question everything and to be agnostic about everything. Like Robert Anton Wilson, I love him. I love him. He's one of my favorite thinkers. And I think it's just the laziness, or it's just like, it's just like, man, I don't want to expend the energy. I found this. This is good. This makes sense. But like you said, you're just opening the key to the first prison and entering a new one. And it's like, hey, maybe there's a couch in here, but you're going to be there. You're just there now, and you're just doing the same thing that you're railing against. You're fighting against the same system within the system that you're fighting against, and it gets a little confusing when you talk about it so much. But because it's hard to, I think about this too. Like, I'm so just blown away every time I read like Carl Jung or like I don't know, anybody that I'm currently like getting involved with, and I'm just like, wow, like all this stuff is opening up, but I can't just like exist in this nether region of abstraction and just I would be lying on the floor of my apartment just foaming at the mouth all day, like, oh man, just like enraptured by awe and not attaching to anything. So it's like we kind of have to pick a highway to get on, but I think that's what it is. It's not a room, it's a highway where we're constantly moving, right?
Absolutely, man. It's definitely a continuum that's constantly unfolding. And I think the problem with that is that implies the fact that there's no destination. That implies the fact that there's no final answer. And for a lot of people, that's not acceptable. That's not palatable.
Right. Yeah.
Like, guess what, man? It's a forever trudge through the gray area. Have fun. Like, that's not very inspiring for most people.
Hey, you guys want to go on a hike through this massively, infinitely long trail of gray? Like, most people are like, nah, I'm good.
Like it or not, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. I love it. I love that. I love exploring that because there's so much there. There's so much. I mean, there's all this wonder. I think you posted something actually pretty awesome the other day with the wizard surfing, and you were like, "What are we fighting about? Let's just explore the wonder and awe of everything."
Yeah,
But
that's right.
I think there's something that's definitely scary. I think about that too. Going within, and I remember I had a guest on the show. And we were talking about he's a non-psychedelic person, and I had asked him a couple of psychedelic questions or about psychedelics, and he was like, "Yeah, I tried mushrooms once, and I didn't like it. I was really scared because I went to this place, and it was just like it just wasn't fun, and I was thinking about all these things that happened in my life, and I just didn't want to be there. So mushrooms just aren't for me." And I kind of was like, oh, okay. Well, yeah, I guess, if that was your, experience. But then I also kind of thought, well, yeah, man, that's kind of like the point,
Right. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Oh, I didn't really, I didn't like to look at the dirt under my rug. I just rather leave it there. That's kind of, to me, it's sort of like, I always think about it as some like psychedelic spring cleaning, that the gears are gummed up, just by virtue of existing, you're accumulating all of this stress and all of these pressures and all of this, self-flagellating, self-deprecating thoughts and worries about your mortality, just all these things that are part and parcel with existence. And it's so difficult to address those directly unless you're really diligent about meditating, and it's just something you do every morning, every night before bed, and you're unloading that stuff on a daily basis. But the vast majority of us are not doing it, so you got to almost do it like a dental teeth cleaning, where it's like you're going to go to the place with the drills and the scraping and the whatever.
Oh, that little hook.
Yeah, I know, but it gets the job done.
It gets the job done.
And sometimes it's not fun, but you feel a lot better when it's over.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's really kind of what we're going through, is that we live in this culture that has mainstreamed the idea that we need to feel good all the time, and if we're not feeling good, then there's something wrong with us. And if it's not about it's not about experiencing the uncomfortable. It's about just trying to get whatever's comfortable, whatever's quick, easy, get that dopamine hit, shove it under the rug, forget about it. I mean, you see this the way I oftentimes look at it in a sense of like, well, if we were in any society where we had some wise leaders guiding us, well, they would be sort of leading by example. And and then we look at like the population and like all the problems that we encounter. And we're like, well, we wonder why, and wasn't Plato, didn't Plato think that we needed that? Like we needed like a system of like wise leaders to guide us. Was that his his thing there. Like he thought that we needed we needed some structure of wise elders to guide the society.
He may have. I'm sure he might discuss that in the Republic, because he talks a lot about the ideal way you would construct society. I don't recall that specifically, but I know for him, like, being a philosopher, being a lover of knowledge was like the bottom line. And you got to remember too, like we were talking about in the beginning of this podcast, for him, being a lover of knowledge and the rational wasn't just like this intellectual endeavor, it was spiritual. Right. It was like when you, like, for him, the soul was divided into three portions. So there was like the I don't know if I'm going to be able to remember the exact words he uses, but the topmost level of the, it was basically like you have the animal soul, you have the kind of heart-based soul, and then you have the mind. And the mind should rule over all three. There's a healthy alignment of all three that you should achieve, but ultimately it's the mind is the closest to the ultimate reality, to the transcendent, to the realm of forms, whatever you want to call it. And the more we can get into that, the more of a philosopher we are, the more of that's what it means to be a knowledge or wisdom lover to him. So it's like it's this thing you're doing with your soul, not with your brain. We think of thinking now as like, it's this thing we do with our brain. To him, it was a thing that you ultimately did with your soul. So I think that's what a leader to him meant. If you weren't a real leader or a real fully formed person unless you were on that kind of a path.
Yeah. And I think that when you're on that kind of a path, and I oftentimes I hear people talk about how they got enlightened, or something like that. And I don't know. I mean, I've had experiences, I've had moments come and go. I don't, other than maybe a few people. I mean, I don't like some. I'm thinking of like maybe like someone like Sadhguru or Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, or I don't know, maybe some of these people, Dalai Lama, I guess. I don't know. But for me, I'm thinking like for most people I meet that claim that they're enlightened or they're woke or whatever, I'm not really buying it. And I kind of think that it doesn't really exist. I think it exists in moments. I think it exists in like constantly calibrating. Mm-hmm. Like not necessarily, it's not this linear path of like, well, we reach this place and then everything's okay. I think it kind of comes in this radio dial, this calibration of moments that occur where it's like you go from like this maybe enlightened state to back to the egoic state and somewhere in between. And then our jobs are really to try and like make sure that we can kind of have a good grasp on that dial to not go too far in the negative directions,
Yeah, well said, man. It's definitely peaks and valleys. And I think it's easy. Like there's certain maps, I think, that do a good job of approximating it, like the hero's journey or the psychedelic experience or the peak experience in and of itself, because it's a wave, right? It's like there's a crest, there's a starting point, there's a pinnacle, and then there's a point where it goes down. And like, that's just how life is, man.
That's what it is.
It's a continuous succession of waves. And I think there are better ways to navigate the waves, but you're not going to just ride to the top of the wave all the way through and like get to the top and be like, now I'm there. That's not.
Wouldn't that be awesome though?
Unfortunately, no.
I mean, just constantly like, woo, like, I've had time, like, now I feel that I can accept that more, but I've had times where I had like some resentment about that. Like, damn, I was in this like monumental, just like exploding field of epiphany and enlightenment and euphoric energy and ecstatic bliss. Fuck, I want to be there all the time. And like, I think when I had Corey Allen on the podcast, and he said, well, I mean, he was like, that's available to you. He said like, that's available. And I didn't understand what he said at the time when he said that. But I think through meditation and daily practice, it's been apparent that these sort of unsexy things are the sort of, just ways to unlock a portion of that on a more consistent basis. You know, do you have daily practices that you engage in?
I'd like to say I do. I mean, I'm not as
I like the idea of it.
as
Yeah,
I should be.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, that's another battle. You know, it's like, but it can become something that doesn't require. I want to be real careful about how I say this, but I think it can become something that doesn't require an overt action like sitting down to meditate, but it has to be at first, especially at first, because it's kind of like you don't know, you have to have a very good idea of what you're going for. And for me, you know, I had another conversation with Corey. Corey has become one of my best friends, so we talk like all the time. But
yeah.
the goal,
His meditation course had really helped get me started.
Awesome,
I had him on the show, and then I got released into Now, and because I had done these guided meditation things like for a little while, and I've tried and failed, but Corey's was really the one that propelled me into kind of making it my own and just doing it my way, and then, you know, continuing on and not being like, oh shit, I didn't do the thing the way that I was supposed to do it, you know. So
that's
yeah.
great. That's
Yeah.
great. But we were talking about, I think it was on a podcast. I'm not sure if it was his or mine. We've done like I don't know. I've been on his like 10 times. He's been on mine like 10 times. But it's kind of like I brought up the point that a lot of people don't realize that being quote unquote mindful isn't this like weird mysterious space you just get when you're meditating. It's
Right.
sort of like you're supposed to do everything like that. You're supposed to pay attention to what you're doing when you're doing it. You're supposed to think about the way your body feels when you're walking, and the way what your mind's doing when your mind's doing it, and the way your arm is moving when you're, you know, at the gym doing the exercise, and the way it smells when you're eating your food, and the way it feels when it's going down your mouth, and the fact that you should be thankful for where this thing came from. It's like it's this constant mindset, you know, of appreciation and equanimity and and being there and interfacing. And nobody's perfect at it. And the more that you're doing and the more distractions that there are, the harder it is to be that way. And that's why it's so important to just actually sit and only do that, because then you're removing all these other distractions. But ideally you can get to a point where it's not only when you're doing that, if that makes sense.
Totally. That's where I feel like I'm going through. I don't want to say that I'm fully there yet, because I still have moments where I'm not there. No one is, right? Yeah, exactly. So, but it helped me get there. It helped. And I when he said that to me, I didn't understand it at the time. And then through the practice, I understood. And like, you know, if I'm walking in the park and I'm just like, I'm just absorbing it all in, you know, and I think that's really when you can, I think, be your best and do your best, you know, when you're totally fully absorbing all the, you know, the sensory input data signals are in tune and in harmony, and you're just like, okay, cool. Like I can be level-headed and I can act in a way that is appropriate and not going to disrupt the, you know, psychic environment in which I'm in, that will cause somebody else to react or act in a certain way, or I won't react or act in a certain way, but I will just appreciate this for what it is. And I think, you know, it sounds like a weird thing to say because it almost sounds very simplified, but I think that it's very difficult to sort of put that into language.
It is, yeah.
When you're just experiencing. Yeah, it's hard to language it. Yeah. Interesting. Well, I guess before you go, is there any kind of final thoughts or anything that you want to communicate out there? Some stuff that you're working on right now, or thinking about, or really kind of enjoying?
Yeah, I mean, it's always the podcast, of course. Third Eye Drops comes out every week. It's just, I guess it's my church or something. It's my way of gumming off the gears, like I talked about earlier. And I have been thinking a lot about this process of looking inward, and, you know, the traps that people tend to fall into. And I think if you want to plug more into that article that we've been talking about is a really good way to do it. And you can just find all this shit at thirdeyedrops.com if you're interested, friends.
Find all the shit at thirdeyedrops.com. Yeah, you are the answer. Why it's more important than ever to become your own guru. Michael, thank you so much, Michael Phillip, for being on here and jamming out with the Mycadelic, with me and my crew. There's no crew, it's just me, but my audience, yeah.
I'm down to do it again.
Yeah, definitely. Let's do it again.
Likewise, my man.
All right, take care. Hey, I hope you guys enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Hope you guys like these podcasts and enjoy them. And if you do, please spread the podcast, share it, tell a neighbor, tell a coworker, tell a friend, tell a cat, tell a mouse, tell a dog, tell an ant, tell a firefly, tell whoever you tell. Share it, spread it, like it, all that good stuff. If you really love the show, you want to go a step further, you really want to help us out, leave a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts, and go to patreon.com, patreon/Mike Brank, and patreon.com/Mike Brank, and you can donate as little as $1 a month, $2 a month, whatever you want. Help support the show that way as well. But remember, I love you guys no matter what you do. I just love that you tune in and you enjoy these podcasts. Message me. I like hearing feedback. Get in touch with me on Instagram, Mycadelic Podcast, Mike Brank on Facebook as well. And thanks to our sponsors, Synchro and Hemp Bombs. If you want a discount on ketogenic and plant-based nutrition products, go to Synchro and type in the code Mycadelic at checkout to get 20% off. And they have amazing ketogenic chocolate fudge called Keto Mana that I have all the time because it has like no sugar and carbs in it. So it's great. And it's delicious. And if you want CBD, go to hempbombs.com and get 15% off all your CBD needs, I guess. And just enter the code Mike15 at checkout. But thank you once again to everybody. Thanks to Danny Barnett and Galaxia for the music, the intro and the outro. I love you all. Peace.